let's go ahead and jump forward a little bit. And it was announced that March 4th, 2000 is when the system would actually launch. And I believe they actually held a PlayStation event, the Festival 2000, before that. I finally got a demo disc from this, by the way, at last for a couple of games, which is cool. But this is where they basically showed off the launch lineup and talked about the system that was about to launch in Japan. And then it happened. And that launch was ginormous. From, again, this was the infancy of the internet, but I was already on forums reading about this stuff, following things as best that I could. And all the reports coming out of Japan was just like tremendous lines everywhere. The system was selling out. It was a big freaking deal. And people waited a long time to get their hands on it. And they did. But, Corey, tying into what you just mentioned, I remember the first impressions of, I don't remember who it was, but someone writing for a US site, possibly even Colin Williamson, when he was still doing stuff for IGN, but I can't remember, got a PS2 at launch, took it back to a hotel room, hooked it up on the hotel TV, and immediately noticed the quote-unquote jaggies, as it's called. And this is what field rendering is all about. And this is, I get it now, and I see the benefits, but I can also understand coming from Dreamcast, which basically drew everything progressively internally at 480p, and it would just sort of like do a flicker filter for the interlaced output. The PS2 was just raw, field rendered, no flicker filter out of the gate. All of this stuff would come in time. Image quality improved a lot, but that first year, there's early dev kits, the first year of dev kits, it didn't actually have options for any of this stuff.
I think that's left a lasting legacy on people's perception of where the PS2 is power-wise, because a lot of people, I think, incorrectly conflate image quality and console power, and they're like, well, the Dreamcast looks cleaner. And to this day, you've still got people say, well, actually, the Dreamcast was more powerful. It's like, no, just because it was doing most games at 480p, it did things differently. And people still think about the jaggies, but really, if you look at the majority of PS2 games, especially if you play them on a CRT, they look so crisp, so clean, that the interlacing in a lot of ways, especially on a CRTs, kind of has a softening or I don't know, it just makes it look really clean. It's almost hard to articulate. I know you feel the same way, John. I know other people don't like how PS2 interlacing looks, even in the later games, but yeah, I mean, it looks incredible.
But Corey, as you said, the screenshot problem. We were reliant on screenshots for information, and as you insinuated, and you're absolutely correct, field rendering is why PlayStation 2 screenshots looked terrible at the time.
Early on, yeah.
Because if you were grabbing a still shot of a PS2 game, you were only going to be taking half of the intended resolution. So, like, let's say you have Ridge Racer 5 launch game. It alternates between 224 lines every frame to create an effect of 448 lines. But if you take a still shot, you're only getting 224 of those lines. Mm-hmm. You're missing half the picture information because of how the screen is drawn, which makes it look extra chunky and nasty. And there's ways around that now. We know we can get better shots out of it, but at the time, the tools were limited. And so what you would get genuinely looked bad. And in magazines, the PS2 didn't actually hold up that well. So those early launch impressions, all those initial games shown off, there was a lot of complaints with those issues.
Interestingly enough, here in Europe, I think, if I remember correctly, it was the official PlayStation magazine that explained what you just explained. And it was kind of one of the first times I became more aware of stuff like that. And I think they had to kind of do that because early on, the problem, like, you got a lot of bull shots at the time as well. Bull shots is kind of like a thing of the past, I think, at this point. But at the time, bullshotting was, it was pretty prevalent.
And also, there was a whole thing, I believe Dead or Alive 2 and Tekken Tag were a couple of the games where if you compare the Japanese version with the overseas version, they updated the dev kits. I believe like the way the buffer is drawn, the lines look a lot clearer, even though they're still field rendered in the North American version.
They actually added like a flicker filter and made some other changes to the way it works. So the North American version's a lot cleaner compared to the Japanese version. Unfortunately, they didn't do that for Ridge Racer, which only has the one graphics mode.
Yeah.
So it's ultra jaggy all the time, but I still love the way it looks.
Dude, I love Ridge Racer 5, man.
Of the launch games for PlayStation 2 in Japan, Ridge Racer 5 is the one that stuck out to me, right? Obviously,
It's still not the Mahjong game. I mean, considering Mahjong on PlayStation 1, we had, when we did our video on the PlayStation 1 launch, I'd say that
Mahjong Taikai 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Koei characters. There was also Morita Shogi.
Yeah.
Which was something. But so Ridge Racer 5, of course, here's the way I look at it. This is peak Y2K aesthetic. Squaresoft was also doing this, but it's these hues, man. It's the combination of these like smooth blue orange gradients. There's like that vibing at sunset. The glass and metal structures stretching off into the distance. The beautiful sky arcing before you. Just the right chill futuristic electronic beats driving the action. There's just this look and vibe to Y2K. Like, it was embodied on Sony hardware. You saw it even in Apple's hardware. You saw it was this, like, lots of weird lines, transparent colors, metal, glass, cool hues, the blues, oranges. It's like going out on an evening in the blinding, like, blue toned, right, like, street lights all around you.
If Ridge Racer was a lotion, you'd be just covered in it right now.
That's right. Get your lotion here at Ridge City FM.
Put that lotion in my ridges, boy.
On your FM dial. So, dude, that's what.
But this is totally my fetish too. So I get you.
Because man, that's what it was all about. And Ridge Racer 5, I thought, was an awesome sequel.
The peak of human civilization, as
the
Matrix told us.
I didn't like the new girl as much. I'd kind of grown to Reiko Nagase. But also, content-wise, I remember this was not one, we'll get to the launch, but like I didn't pick this up at the very launch of the system, but I did pick it up shortly thereafter. And I think Type 4 had just set my expectations so sky high for the series. And so once I had played it a little bit, it wasn't exactly what I wanted from 5. But graphically,
they went back to the original.
Yeah.
Like,
they went way more back to the arcade roots.
They did, but there's still a lot more content in there than the arcade games.
Sure.
And I would say the handling is better than Ridge Racer Type 4 by a lot.
Yeah.
I think it's the best handling in the series, actually.
There wasn't a big gap between Type 4 and 5 as far as I remember. I feel like it was only a couple of years or maybe even less. Maybe
the whole theme of Ridge Racer 4 is, the turn of the century.
So then with Ridge Racer 5, the other thing it does that I love, and you mentioned the girl, but Ife Kami is what she's called in Ridge Racer 5. Yeah. Whether you like her or not, she stars in what was an absolutely mind-blowing demonstration of real-time graphics rendering. That introduction sequence is so impressive for a few reasons. First of all, the whole thing's 60 FPS. They have super detailed car and character models in it. And I think you guys as video editors as well can really appreciate this. It's the logos. It's those transitions between everything.
Yeah.
Cutting to those 60 FPS, like very stylized logos and having them actually be generated with real-time elements rather than just like video. That stuff was really cool. And like it felt very special to be able to do. So they were actually doing fancy like things that you would typically only see in pre-edited, like pre-rendered content.
Lots of flash cuts and
lots of flash cuts and like logos and like drawing stuff, and it all did it in real time.
And done in such a specific way to the hardware that it didn't really work on emulators until more recently.
Right. There's some glitches there's something with the way Namco handles textures and other things in that game where like it would absolutely destroy PCSX2, especially the hardware renderer. Like the introduction movie, when you try to watch the intro, it's just a mess of like corrupted flashing polygons and like weird textures, and the whole thing was completely broken for the longest time.
That's hilarious, really.
It took them a long time to emulate it. And that's probably because the rules weren't there yet, right? Like Namco just jumped in there and they did whatever they could without following any quote unquote best practices, and they just got it to work. And so that can be tricky. But alongside Ridge Racer 5, there was some other interesting games. Eternal Ring was a From Software game,
Yeah.
which I was interested in right away because I actually quite like the Kingsfield games, and this is effectively a sort of a sidestep,
It's
sort
like
of
a
like
Gaiden
Kingsfield
game.
Gaiden, right?
Yeah.
That's basically what it is. It's that first person sort of action RPG. It's not terribly massive, but it's 60 FPS. It actually feels like a really nice upgrade for that type of game, and it was a lot of fun. There was also Street Fighter EX3,
Hmm.
which, while not loaded with content, I love the Street Fighter EX games, and I wouldn't say this exceeds EX2 in my book, but it's really cool. It plays great. They have that 4-player mode in there, and they used basically like arranged soundtrack. The arranged soundtracks that was done for EX2, I think,
Uh,
basically was used as the game's soundtrack here at Audi, if I recall.
yeah. So this was, when it came to the PlayStation 2 lineup, this was actually my most kind of like regarded. I was just like, because EX is actually my favorite Street Fighter, and man, for fighting game fans, we be eating good on the PS2 launch. So I was really excited. But yeah, and I was actually most hyped for this. It uses like a more realistic graphic style, and the soundtrack you mentioned is actually the arranged soundtracks from 1 and 2. It's not just 2.
Not just 2, right?
yeah.
But it's got Strange Sunset, and that's what matters.
Yeah, incredible song, right? So we can go more into what I thought of it once we started playing it, but like this was for me, and I was surprised at the time because I remember this being revealed on the Japanese side, and I was like, "This is Street Fighter." Obviously, it's EX, but that was my favorite of the Street Fighter series. But at this point, Street Fighter had lost its luster, I think, towards Tekken. Because I remember being very alone in my hype for this game.
I felt like it was unfairly maligned because of things like Soul Calibur and Tekken and Dead or Alive 2 hitting. And people were just kind of... But the series always had that problem, I feel.
Yeah, it did.
Like Street Fighter EX never really got the respect it deserves.
No,
in my
not
book.
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Probably in an episode of its own talking about Arika and like the fighting layer stuff. But like, yeah, I mean, this to me was like the most fun, and it wasn't the most competitive. I've never been a competitive guy when it comes to fighting games in general. I just like playing them and always have. But it was just such a fun romp of a fighting game, the EX games. And they tweaked certain things about canceling and such in Street Fighter that I found very satisfying. But I see also why it upsets competitive players. But to me, it was just like, it was the best sounding Street Fighter. It had some of the coolest characters, like Skullomania, and just other things like this. It's a very different feeling Street Fighter, but at the time, this is what I kind of wanted rather than the direction we went in with 3, which didn't feel much like a Street Fighter game at the time of release. This was like, this is my Street Fighter 3.
But having that on the shelf next to Tekken Tag, I think that most people that are buying
it
the
wasn't a
system
comparison.
are going for Tekken over that. Because especially since Tekken is such spectacle. Not only that, but it's like such a brand that was, or a series that was associated with PlayStation so closely.
Yeah, and Tekken had broken boundaries with Tekken 3 already. So the idea, this was basically Tekken 4 before 4 in the sense that people were looking at this as the next one. It had all the characters coming back. It had you had new modes. It had like the lighting system that John was talking about, because even people that didn't know what that stuff was on a technical level, they could see it. And, Street Fighter EX3 couldn't compare. You had like these weird character models that stick out because like Ryu and stuff is like realistic, but then you have Blanca, which is like kind of out of, and he's always been out of place, but now even more so. And you have a lot of exaggerated muscular characters that don't fit in with the more lean regular characters suddenly because they changed the entire graphic style. So there are issues with EX3, but that was still the that I was most hyped for, along with some others we'll get to when we talk about the European launch.
I guess the big technical improvement over the prior games is simply that they actually had 3D backgrounds now.
Yeah,
and
I
more
don't know if
advanced
that's an
particle effects.
improvement. Is that an improvement? Is it
I would
to you?
say so.
Like,
yeah, because so it still has the infinite floor effect of the PS1 games. It's basically like, so it's like to me it's like Tekken 3 PS1 versus Tekken 3 Arcade, where Tekken 3 Arcade had polygon backgrounds, whereas the PS1 version was just flat 2D graphics. And I feel like just having polygons in the background adds a lot of extra parallax to the movement that made the worlds feel just better to my eyes than just having the straight flat backgrounds.
To me, even at the time when I first played it, I felt like Street Fighter EX3 felt muted because you had such a cool artistic expression in those 2D backgrounds, or the flat textures on 1 and 2, but then you got to 3 and it was just like, yeah, it's 3D, but it's so muted compared to what those others tried to kind of visually represent.
I thought at the time, though, it was still like a nice improvement. And some of those, like there was that stage with the bridge and the water that has like the reflections and stuff.
Sure,
I always remember that sticking out. It looked really cool to my eye. But we don't need to go through every title here. But there was, obviously there was Stepping Selection, which is big. There was Drum Mania from Konami, of course, which was an arcade game that required the drum controller. I think you could play with a pad, though, if I recall.
I believe so, yeah.
But this was during the rise of music games for Konami, Bemani, I guess, when it was blowing up. So Dance Dance Revolution and all that, all of which would come to the PlayStation 2, of course. We of course had some shogi games, Kakinoki Shogi 4. There was Mahjong Taikai 3, which was a koi game, and that was actually one that started, I think, back on the Famicom even.
Yep.
And it was around for a while, and you had sort of the fancy 3D character intro for the game, but the actual game itself is just very bog standard looking.
We'll do a full DF retro on this later.
Of course. There's also the Morita Shogi, which I mentioned earlier, which I mean, dude, it's interesting how there was
like people the simulation of shogi is very important to a certain subset of people.
And they're not listening to this show.
Yeah, they are.
To be fair, Morita Shogi was also on Nintendo 64, if I believe. So this was basically like taking shogi, but it was higher resolution. So you got proper 448i, I guess, versus the 240p of the lesser N64 game.
Finally.
I don't know if anyone who's a hardcore shogi fan knows what 240p and 480i is.
You'd be surprised, man. I have spoken to people when working in Japan that are very keen on the history of shogi games on consoles.
So there are some interesting things. Like the thing is like Morita Shogi on PS2 actually didn't have online play, or like didn't have a network feature. And you're probably like, wait, like, why are you saying it like that, John? It's because the N64 version of Morita Shogi 64 had a built-in modem connection port right into the cartridge.
I don't think
play with people online.
I even knew that. Wow. I'm the N64 guy. I should know this. Wow.
Suck it, PS2 fans.
Yeah. That's why I didn't get one at launch.
Exactly. I was going to import it, and then I saw it lacked the online play. I said, I was like, screw this. Toss it back, man.